Hello. So I'm going to talk in this video about how I connect with true spirits, and yeah, I've been having a conscious relationship with the spirits of nature around me in my vicinity for probably about 4 years now, and over that time period my ability to pick up messaging from these spirits has only strengthened. But to be honest, I never sought out to do this. This happened very intuitively, and I think the best way for me to teach another person how they can develop a sacred relationship with nature, a deeper relationship with nature, is to tell it through the way that I did it and to kind of give little pointers. But like a disclaimer, when it comes to cultivating a relationship with the spirits of nature or any spirits, you know, this is a very nuanced thing, and these expressions happen on such a personal level. So the way that I interpret communication from these spirits is probably not going to be the same way that you interpret communication from these spirits. So to kind of have an openness about your exploration, because I think that curiosity is really what leads you to discover the way that you are meant to communicate, you know, and we all have our different ways. I believe that everyone here is psychic. It's just whether we are open to those abilities or not. So yeah, there's that journey. But yeah, so I'm going to talk about my story, about how I figured this out, and then at the end we're going to summarize and try to give you some steps if this is something that you're interested in cultivating in your life. So I came back to Sweden. I am half Swedish and I lived here before about 4 years ago, and at that moment in time my life was completely falling apart. And when I came back to Sweden, I moved in with my mum and I experienced an awakening and came into my first experience of dark night of the soul. And anyone that has been through that experience knows that it's not a walk in the park. You know, I was grasping with the perception of my own existence and the perception of the existence of this universe, basically, and dealing with a lot of repressed trauma now brought to the surface, and just feeling everything. So I didn't know what to do with myself, and I just began taking really long walks. I just began walking a lot, a lot. And if you know anything about Sweden or Scandinavia, then you know that we have many beautiful forests here, and it's pretty easy to run into forest land just in any area. So I was just basically stopping in to a forest on my way home. There's a forest that I lived right next to, so I would stop and I would always sit in the same spot. And so that brings me to the first point of how to begin this journey, is to really start to build a sacred space for connecting with nature, you know? Because of course, if we want to start building a relationship with the spirits of nature, true spirits specifically, then we have to give an opportunity to connect with them, you know? There's no way that we can connect with these spirits if we're spending all of our time inside, away from them. So coming back to the same place and just having familiarity with that space and the spirits in that vicinity is super helpful. So yeah, anyway, I was coming back to the same place, and again, not thinking that I was connecting anything, but I just started to notice the difference in how I felt when I sat for, it could be like 10 minutes a day. It was not always very long, but it was on a daily basis, how different I felt. And after doing this for quite a while, I started to feel like it has to have something to do with the forest. And I started to make sure that every time I was in the forest, I was then purposely connecting with the earth more. So that brings me to step 2, which is grounding. So I was making sure that I was connecting with the earth, with my skin, my hands, my feet, taking off my shoes, touching the trees. And as I started to do that, I started to notice that the increase in the change of my emotions and the ability for me to feel calm and at peace and held only increased. So when I started to notice the difference in how I felt before I came into the forest versus after I came into the forest, I was so fucking grateful. I was so fucking grateful. So I started to thank the forest, not thinking that anything was going to reply to me. I started to thank. So that's 3. Gratitude, you know. So I would literally, after every time I sat in the forest, I would just say out loud, like, thank you so much for being here for me. Thank you so much for like helping me, because I had already accepted that like I was getting something out of this like experience. I was getting something by me holding space for nature in my daily routine. You know, it was bringing a sense of relief that I was not finding anywhere else in my life in that period of time. So I was just extremely, extremely grateful. And what I started to do is I started to interact more and more with trees around me. So, you know, like I had this one space, it was actually not too far away from the space that I'm filming this video, where there were about 7 trees around in that circle. And after I would be done with sitting and just embracing, I would touch each one of those trees and thank them individually. And what I started to notice as time went on is that there was shifts in the energetic transmission as I touched the trees. So that brings me to step 4. I don't know how many steps there are going to be in this, to be honest, but and that's cultivating the awareness that something is shifting, you know, because I started to sense that there were differences in each tree as I touched them, that some trees felt more open and some trees were more closed. Some trees felt like they wanted to embrace me more, and some trees sometimes felt like they didn't actually want that embrace at all. You know, there was definitely this spectrum of feeling. So this stayed like this for a long, long time, where I was just kind of amazed at the fact that I could pick up on this sense of emotion. And it probably also is a disclaimer to say here that, you know, everything else that was going on in my life at that time was leading me to stop suppressing maybe the gifts that I had always had. And I think that anyone on this psychic development journey kind of understands that this is something that we remember, not necessarily learn. And a lot of these things that I had been doing, I had always been doing throughout my whole life. It's just that I had not given it awareness, or the awareness had distorted in other things that I had been experiencing in my life. So it remained like that, and I started to notice shifts in the emotional states of trees. So once I got to this point, and this was, I would say, daily coming to the forest for maybe 6 months with no expectation, I started to strengthen my ability to focus by meditating. And this was really when I first started to meditate. So I was just sitting in a Vipassana style meditation as I took these kind of intervals in the forest every day. And as I began to do that, I started to pick up messages in other formats. Now, I think that when this first starts happening, it's very natural to doubt your own experience and to not validate what the messaging is. And that definitely happened to me. I think it was probably like 3 months of me picking up certain things and still being in this transition period where I hadn't fully come into surrendering to my experience and kind of was pushing things away. And because of that, the communication was very inconsistent. So that brings me to 5, I think it's 5, which is validating your experience here. Because what I noticed, the shift in the kind of bandwidth that I could receive messages, was when I fully just accepted that I was receiving messages. I fully went in and acknowledged that the information was not coming from my own inner psyche. It was coming from other entities. And I think also another point which I also find very helpful when it comes to spirit connection, because I think that anyone that is in the process of developing their mediumship skills will have this self-doubt in which they will ask themselves, is this just an extension of my own consciousness, or is this something else? And the thing is, like, it could be both. And if it is both, and if the guidance that you are getting is something that feels helpful, does it really matter where the origin of that comes from? You know, that was a really helpful piece of advice that I got, to kind of let the pressure off of defining where these sources of knowledge were coming through. And over time, once I allowed that to kind of surpass, I really saw a big strengthening in the ability to channel messages from the tree spirits. And, you know, it comes from a lot of the things, because a lot of the messages that I pick up from tree spirits are about the earth and things that, you know, I haven't read, I don't know on a logical sense, and that I have a inner knowing that this is information that comes beyond me. So I continued to do that, and as time went on, as time has gone on, the ability to speak to trees has only strengthened, to the point now that I hear messages, I see images, I feel emotions, and can get full stories from the spirits of nature. They're there to guide me, they're there to support me, and it's a beautiful, beautiful relationship, and one that I believe that anyone can cultivate, you know. So yeah, that is it. I don't think there's anything more that is needed when beginning the journey of connecting with tree spirits. I wanted to keep this as simple as possible, because sometimes there's a tendency to think that these things are really intricate processes, when all they really involve is an openness, an awareness, consistency, creating a relationship. Because I think that this is a very, very big facet of this, is that it is a relationship, and like any relationship in life requires, you know, patience. It requires understanding. It requires, it's not just all taking, coming to the forest and say, give me the message. Commitment. It requires love on both ends, you know, that connection. You're there to connect, not to take. And that is something that I've learned a lot about connections with the spirit realm. So in summary, let's just bring it back, is to create a sacred space, create familiarity, I can't say that word, with the space that you're in, is to connect deeper with the earth around you, meaning grounding, touching, having physical contact with the trees around you, cultivating gratitude to already the relationship that you have, regardless of whether you can feel or see the communication, having awareness to the different changes within your own emotional state, and then deepening your practices with meditation and consistency, commitment, coming back to the same thing again and again. It's not a one night and done thing. It's something that really develops over time. And you know what, like, I'm sure I'm at the beginning of my journey to developing my relationship to spirit, and I only see this as something that you can build and grow with for the continuation of your entire life, which is something so cool and beautiful. But yeah, that is exactly how I connect with tree spirits. Now, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I absolutely love hearing other people's stories about their communication with tree spirits and anything else to do with this subject. So if you do have any comments, if you do have anything to share with me, then yeah, drop me a comment, or I'm going to put my email down below. You can reach me on social media, or you can reach me via email. Or if you have any further questions about how to begin this relationship, again, come at me, because this ability to speak and to have this connection to nature in my life has really, really, really just contributed to my entire perspective of living, and it's one of the most beautiful and sacred relationships that I have in my life. So I am more than happy to share anything out of my experience to allow someone else to follow that journey. But it's really not that complicated. And if you take anything away from this video, if you're like, okay, I don't really know where to start, so it's just go outside, be outside, find a place that you like, sit down and just be. Just notice yourself, just give yourself time to be in that. And soon enough, when you have that awareness, when you have that commitment again and again, you will notice communication. That communication, like I said, may look different for you than it does for me, but it will look like it's meant to look for you. All right, I'm going to leave you there. It was lovely to talk to you, and have a wonderful day. Peace.